Good morning. This is Saturday Morning with George and Phil. 22 minutes to help you become the best version of yourself. Whether you found yourself out of shape, struggling in a dead end job, or in job transition, we're your hosts, George Murray and Lenny Newman, pinch hitting for Phil while he's away. We do encourage questions in the chat, and we'll try to answer as many as time allows. Hey, George.
Hey, good morning. You know what? It is almost like 90% of the time, 2 minutes before we go live, there's always some kind of obstacle, but we seem to turn around and overcome it like in 30 seconds.
You know, just hitting curveballs, George. That's all you do. That's all you do. You just hit curveballs.
Absolutely.
Well, this morning, we're going to continue where we've been the last several shows. We're now 4 chapters into your new book, due out in May. Ignite, Engage, and Retain. George, can you talk a little bit more about this second book that everybody's anxiously awaiting to publish?
Yeah, so before we do, I want to make sure that everybody knows that we're stream live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, Yahoo. So if you are actually watching the video, make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you get an awareness of the next update on the show. Yeah, so we're a little bit out of whack, always going into the last 2 minutes of something like that disruption. But to your answer, the answer to your question, before we do, wanted to thank the folks at Thrivent for sponsoring the show. The guys at Thrivent for more than 10 years, along with Skip Nelson, have been helping folks really reach financial freedom. In the next 2 weeks, really, they're focusing on helping folks contact creditors and request fee flexibility and reduction. I can tell you in career transition, boy, it's really hard to reach out and get that. And they actually have the experience and skill to help you reduce that cost pressure when you're going through difficult times. So reach out to Skip just by taking your phone and scrolling over the bottom right corner and setting up a free consultation.
Now, George, tell me a little bit more about the book. I want to hear more about the book.
Yeah, I found that I find like writing books about gaps, in the last probably 10 years, a lot of leaders have been giving a lot of information that it's this coming. The Great Resignation is coming, about all these great, employee engagement surveys and the lack thereof. 15% are working against your rowing efforts in the right direction. And so the book is really to help 3 scenarios, right? First of all, if you're a business leader or a business itself, if you've got some team that are not rowing in the right direction, how do you really get everybody in that same direction, in the right seat? I mean, the things that we're talking about for probably the last 10 years plus. The second answer it's supposed to help is leaders who are taking new roles. I've been hearing that, engagement is really a challenge, especially in this hybrid workforce. How am I supposed to start off in my best foot forward? And then the last question it's supposed to answer is, companies may be doing some great things, but they're still seeing that churn, right? How do I, set myself in the right direction as an organization or a leader to take the next level in employee engagement and uniting the workforce, and more importantly, retaining our talent, because it's so critical right now. People got options.
Well, and this whole Great Resignation, George, I read an article recently that leaders right today, there's like 4 leadership skills that all organizations are looking for in this post-COVID-19 workplace. I'm just curious, do we have anybody, George, who we can kind of invite into our virtual coffee shop and, talk a little bit about these 4 leadership skills that all companies are looking for?
Absolutely. Who would know best than somebody who's reached out by leaders and businesses to find that right talent? So we want to welcome to the show Steve Yakish. Steve is a president at Verseek as far as direct hire and executive search. So Steve, welcome to the show and good morning.
Thanks for having me, George. Good to see you, Lenny.
Nice to see you as well, Steve. Good morning. I'm curious, how's business in general, and what kind of leaders are your clients looking for today as a result of the mass resignation?
Yeah, Overall, I mean, business, we're as busy as we've ever been in the last 20 years, as everybody can probably imagine.
Good problem.
Yeah, good problem for us. But I think the overall, the the leadership traits and qualities that organizations are looking for, some of them are still what traditionally everybody's been looking for over the last 25 years. Strategic vision, and the ability to lead and grow an organization. But now you start to bolt on attributes of employee engagement, connectivity, all the things that we read out there and we hear and feel why some really top talented people are leaving organizations. And so as these organizations are bringing leaders in, they want leaders that are going to be able to connect and retain and build relationships with their teams.
Hey, Steve, out of all the traits that are out there, I'm sure that there's a lot that goes through the job description. What are the few that, your clients are looking for that rise above the top? I hear things like servant leadership and coach and mentoring and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, it's the ability to, I guess, kind of come back to that connectivity piece and what kind of creativity and what have they done? What have they learned that hasn't worked in the past? So they can. And I think every leader needs to have a philosophy and make sure that it's core to who they are as a leader. So as you said, George, kind of that servant leadership. But they need to be able to ask questions of their people to understand what's important to their team, what's important to those individuals, and be curious on what is important to their leaders and to their teams.
Hey, Steve, can we go a little deeper on connectivity? Because, one of the things for me, what that denotes is, compassion, listening, some things that quite frankly may not have been present pre-COVID. Mm-hmm. Are there some of those things you're seeing as well that people are speaking to you about when they're doing a search for a key leader?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think those are coming in at servant leadership, the compassion, and just the desire for their teams to do their best work and to know that their teams are valued.
Sure. So, Steve, suppose I'm starting a new leadership role as early as Monday. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give me as I come into that new leadership role, whether I'm a CEO or a COO or anyone in the C-suite? How would you guide me?
Listen to the people, assess the staff, and get to know them. I think there's a lot of really good, books out there. The first 90 days, the first 100 days, George, hits a lot of them in his books. But really, those first 90 days are absolutely critical to start employee engagement, start building trust, rapport with your teams. And again, going back to being curious, asking questions, not just why do we do it this way, but do you think it's the best way to do it, and really drive engagement that way.
Got it. So what I heard there was listening is a critical skill for leaders that you're trying to place right now.
100%.
Yep, I got it. I would agree with that.
So we're getting back to the servant leadership, because that's one of the oldest leadership styles. It's like what is old is new today, right? Mm-hmm. Out of all those traits, can you tell us a little bit about, when clients are talking about servant leader, I always, when people say we're looking for a servant leader, I always try to define that because everybody says it right now. It's kind of the hot topic. What are the things that clients are looking for? I'm sure you talked briefly on it, but is it really, the compassion? It's got to be, I'm going to help people lift them up versus just look at the status of getting to the next rung as a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when it comes to the really, really strong leaders out there that kind of separate themselves from others, they hold people accountable. They have that vision and they get things done, but they do it in a way that makes people feel valued and important. And I think that's what I see when we talk about servant leadership, is how can I help you get what you need done? but if they don't know truly what they need to be done, that's an issue too. So it's that blend of servant leadership. I'm here to help, but prior to being a servant leader, you need to be able to articulate what is the job, and that I'm going to hold you accountable because I want you to be successful. And here's how we're going to define success in your role over the next 90 days, the next year, whatever that time period might be. So until you have that definition of success for that individual from a work standpoint, you can't necessarily be that true servant leader, in my opinion. And then the really good ones also kind of set the work stuff aside and say, help me define what success looks like for you as an individual outside of work. Because a lot of really good leaders will appreciate that balance, integration, whatever we're calling it today, between work and life. Mm-hmm. And they'll work hard to help their teams be their best person outside of work. Because in all reality, if they're the best person outside of work, they're going to be so much more effective, productive inside of work.
You know, it's really interesting, Steve. Over the last 2 years, I don't recall as much discussion around inside outside of work, you know, this whole work-life balance. Mm-hmm. We're hearing a lot of that right now, I think, due to the fact that, you know, we're in this hybrid environment. Mm-hmm. What can you share with George and me about, and the viewers, about your thoughts on what are some of the best leaders doing to keep their folks engaged and to retain them? I mean, some of the easy ones, you know, compensation. I'm hearing people when they leave right now, the number one reason is not compensation. So what are you seeing? What are some of the things that you're observing that you can share?
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Lenny. I mean, what we hear is compensation. Everybody wants to be paid fair value for the work they're doing and the success they have, but it is normally 4, 5, 6 on their list of priorities if they are going to make a change. So I 100% agree with you. So getting back to what can leaders do, you know, it's really around that engagement. You know, I think everybody early in the pandemic, they were scrambling to do their, you know, we all saw the screenshots with the team on, and they were all had, you know, their favorite cup of coffee, or they brought their dogs into the screen, you know, all the things that we all tried. But now I think, you know, in a normal 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, everybody's in the office environment. What were the things that went on in that environment that made an organization sticky? And a lot of those could just simply be those 5-minute conversations while you're filling up a cup of coffee, and you ask that person, what did you do this weekend? Or did you see the Vikings blow another one? Or what, you know, whatever those small little, you know, conversations are. And so I think it's around how do you create that in a virtual environment? If you are still in this remote environment, I personally believe, and I know this isn't feasible for everybody, but getting people into the office is going to be the most critical component, in my opinion, because those little conversations that allow me to get to know Lenny more on a personal basis, because we're grabbing coffee and I find out that Lenny likes to golf and so do I. And so now we have that connection point. You don't necessarily do that over a video call. But if you are still in a remote environment, be very purposeful in how do you draw out those conversations. And I believe a lot of really good leaders are not only doing some of these collective video kind of team calls within their own team, but they're taking some of their team and handing them off to a peer of theirs. So the marketing team is integrated with the IT and the finance team in a very purposeful, non-work related environment. So they get to know people across, different departments. But at the end of the day, I'm a true believer, if at all possible, get your people back into the office and show the value for that collaboration, that energy, that connectivity. Because I think in some of these big companies, the Googles of the world that are staying remote for the foreseen future, they're the ones that are going to have the great resignation, because their people are going to be lonely, because we're social beings and it's hard to be social just sitting behind a video screen.
So you think that the hybrid model is going to be here to stay, and companies are going to have some fallout, is what I hear you saying, just because it's you're right. We are social beings. I know for the couple of months or 6 months or 8 months that I was holed up, I was like a caged animal. I had to interact with people. So I love the fact that we're now doing 3D as opposed to 2D. So it will be interesting though, because I know there's a lot of pressure on big organizations to keep the hybrid model. But I do agree with you, Steve. I think the sooner we can get back into a more normal office routine, and it may not be 5 days a week. It may be 3 days a week or 4 days a week. But I agree with you.
Yeah, and what we've done is, we've got core collaboration days in our office. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it's core collaboration. People are in the office. They still work their day. I mean, they're out of the office doing things, but we do allow for Mondays and Fridays on the bookends to work from home if you want to. Sure. But what we found is, everybody's coming back on our core days, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. But the percentage of our population of our teams are becoming greater and greater to see them in the office on Monday and Fridays, because it's a fun place. They like seeing people, and that number is just ratcheting up as well.
So maybe what you're alluding to is there's, as a result of the Great Resignation, there's a great compromise, because what I heard you say is you're meeting your team somewhere in the middle, which, that's a good trait in my opinion. George, what questions do you have as we come down the home stretch?
Well, one of the things that you brought up is that interface virtually, right? And so a couple of things that come to my mind, especially when we were going into pandemic. One of the companies I was working for at the time, we were at a 30% growth through the pandemic, right? With all the supply chain issues and everything else. You certainly can't virtually turn a wrench, right? So you definitely have to get people involved, but you also make sure you have to involve those people who are in hybrid in the workforce, so that they don't, just find every particular opportunity to actually go out and find another opportunity in a hybrid. So one of the things that I was able to do was just do virtual coffees, like, 2 shifts. We were running 2 shifts, right? So 15 minutes, people could log on to a Teams, and I would just start off by saying, here's the state of the business, right? And then if anybody had questions, it actually got me an opportunity to learn more about your people, like you were talking about, on a personal side, like, hey, what are you doing the weekend? We started talking about sports and everything else. And I think that was really critical for us to bring people together, even in a hybrid environment. And then the other topic is that, I was working for, a client probably a couple of months ago. Every morning, I have a standard operating procedure, a cadence, and I go out, hey, good morning to everybody, and just ask them, how can I help? And a lady came up to me and she says, you know what, George? I've been here 26 years, and you're the only person that has come in every morning and state, good morning, recognize me, and then, hey, ask me. And it's those little things. It's those little things that help engage people. So one of the things I'm going to ask you is how important is optimism for a leader in those challenging times? Because I label myself tenaciously optimistic.
No, I think it's extremely important, George, and it's a great topic. And I think, there's that optimistic realism. If things aren't going well, you can't hide or skirt around it, as we know. But to have optimism to say, even if I don't have the answer today, but I'm working hard and I'm leveraging resources and I'm going to find this answer and things are going to be okay. I think people want to hear about that from their leaders, and to see that optimism. And as long as those leaders are following through, even if it's a non-update, if I'm asked a question and I'm optimistic that we're going to find a solution for it, but I don't have it a week later, I'm going to make sure to still reach back out and say, hey, I haven't forgot. I'm still optimistic that we're going to find this solve, but I don't have it yet, but we're still working. I just wanted to make sure that you were in the know. So, like anything, it's communication and follow up. Those are what the great leaders do, in my opinion.
And I tell people is that it's important, gone are the days as a leader showing up and saying, "Hey, I'm one dimensional. This is who I am." Leaders have to adjust according to the situation, right? And more importantly, they need to turn around. Gone are the days also as to, do as I say, not as I do, right? Just barking orders. It's saying, "Hey, here is why we have to do, behind the what," right?
100%. Yep.
So, Steve, as we shared earlier, these 22 minutes go incredibly fast. We're on the home stretch here. One final question for you: if there's one thing you could leave with our viewers post hybrid, excuse me, what would that be in terms of people keeping talent in their organizations? There's one thing they could do. What would that be?
I think the one thing is ask the question of what's important to your employees and adjust accordingly. I know we talked about it earlier, but I think that's the absolute thing. Be curious, ask questions. As busy as you are, be diligent about asking your people questions, both what can I do to help you in the workforce, and as important, how's things going outside of work?
Outstanding. That's terrific.
Hey, Steve, again, I know you're busy. You probably got more than 150 open positions, and I'm sure we'll plug you.
Yeah.
If people are looking for opportunities or the businesses looking for that talent.
Awesome. Well, Lenny and George, appreciate you having me on.
Hey, Steve, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks for joining us on Saturday morning.
Take care.
You bet.
Yep, they certainly do go fast.
Yeah, they do. Here we go again. So for those of you who are interested, you can reach out to Steve Yakish. You can see his email address and a direct dial phone number. As George and I discussed with Steve, he is incredibly busy. So be patient, because I know he's a very busy gentleman these days. So we do want to thank Steve again for stopping in and visiting with us. And please, if you know someone who might find this show valuable, please encourage them to take a look at the playback. And I also want to give a heartfelt thank you to our producer, the guy behind the scenes who makes George and me look, he makes it look easy. So Ethan, heartfelt shout out to you. Ethan Connor's our friend. So you can find him on LinkedIn probably in about another 60 days. So Ethan Connor.
Hey, great. And the next show we're coming up in 2 weeks, we're talking about where is HR, right? It's the last 5+ years in talking to a lot of CHROs as I talk about the book. HR has gone from transactional to really business partner. And the questions we're going to ask, is where is your HR leadership in this whole hybrid post-pandemic? So hopefully we'll be able to see you guys. And I want to reinforce the same thing. If you guys find this valuable, you think this can help others, please share the show on LinkedIn.
So until next time, have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you so much for sharing your Saturday morning coffee with George and Lenny, pinch hitting for Phil. And remember, achieve forward and
get better.